Don't touch that file. Judge Naomi Carter's voice was quiet, but something in the way she said it made two courthouse employees stop walking. Officer Daniel Mercer did not. He stood beneath the cold fluorescent lights of the federal courthouse hallway, one hand hovering near the slim leather case Naomi held against her side, his expression carrying the confidence of a man who believed the badge on his chest settled every argument before it began. "Then tell me what you're doing in a restricted area," Mercer said. Naomi looked directly at him. She was 44, dressed in a charcoal business suit beneath a dark jacket, her posture composed despite the growing circle of strangers watching from several feet away. "I've already told you. I have official business here." Mercer gave a humorless smile. "Everybody has official business when they get stopped." Naomi's eyes moved briefly to the body camera clipped to his uniform, then toward the security camera mounted near the ceiling. She seemed to notice everything. The camera, the witnesses, the number engraved beneath Mercer's badge. 4172. "Officer Mercer," she said, "you should think very carefully about what you do next." The warning should have slowed him down. Instead, it seemed to offend him. "Are you threatening me?" "No." Naomi's voice remained level. "I'm giving you an opportunity." A courthouse clerk standing near the elevators suddenly recognized Naomi and went pale, but before she could speak, Naomi gave her the smallest shake of the head. "Stay quiet." Mercer noticed the exchange and misunderstood it completely. "Open the case." "I can't do that." "Can't." His eyebrows lifted. "Or won't. The documents inside are protected." That answer hardened his suspicion. Mercer reached toward the case. Naomi stepped aside, keeping it close. In the awkward movement, his hand caught the edge of her jacket. There was a sharp tearing sound. Nothing dramatic followed. No shouting. No struggle. Just silence. Naomi looked down at the torn seam near her shoulder. Then she slowly raised her eyes toward Mercer. Somewhere behind them, an elevator bell chimed. "Are the hallway cameras recording?" she asked. Mercer glanced toward the ceiling and gave a dismissive shrug. "Every second." Naomi held his gaze. "Good." For the first time, something uncertain passed across his face. She looked again at his badge. Daniel Mercer. Badge 4172. His expression tightened. "Why are you memorizing my number?" Naomi adjusted the torn edge of her jacket and secured the leather case beneath her arm. Her phone vibrated inside her pocket. The screen illuminated for only a moment, long enough for the courthouse clerk to see the caller identification. U.S. Marshal Service. Naomi silenced it without answering. Then she looked back at Mercer with a calmness that suddenly felt heavier than anger. "I'm not memorizing it, Officer Mercer," she said. "I already knew it." The hallway seemed to lose its air. Mercer stared at her, his confidence beginning to fracture around the edges. Naomi took one measured breath and delivered the sentence he would remember long after that morning was over. "You just made this investigation much easier." 20 minutes earlier, Naomi Carter had entered the federal courthouse alone, carrying nothing that announced who she was. No judicial robe. No staff surrounding her. No special introduction waiting at the entrance. Just a dark jacket, a charcoal suit, and a slim leather case held securely beneath one arm. Outside, the morning air carried the last traces of an overnight rain, leaving the sidewalks shining beneath a pale Virginia sky. Inside, everything felt colder. Fluorescent lights stretched across the high ceiling, shoes clicked against polished stone, and quiet conversations disappeared beneath the steady rhythm of security checkpoints and elevator bells. Naomi had walked through buildings like this for years, but that morning was different. She was not there to preside over a public hearing. She was there for a confidential review scheduled before the courthouse became crowded. The documents inside her case concerned allegations that had traveled through several offices before finally reaching federal attention. She knew the names. She knew the dates. Most importantly, she knew the patterns. Naomi passed security after presenting credentials to a deputy who immediately recognized her. She thanked him and continued toward the restricted corridor on the third floor, unaware that Officer Daniel Mercer had noticed her from nearly 30 feet away. Mercer had been speaking with another officer when his attention shifted toward her. His eyes followed Naomi as she crossed the hallway. She walked with purpose, but to Mercer, confidence without a visible explanation looked suspicious. "Who is she?" he asked. The other officer glanced over. "No idea. That should have been the end of it." It was not. Mercer watched Naomi pass the public elevators and continue toward the secured section near the federal courtrooms. He did not ask the deputy at security whether she had been cleared. He did not call the clerk. He did not check the courthouse access system. Instead, he followed. Naomi heard the footsteps behind her before she heard his voice. "Ma'am." She stopped and turned. Mercer approached with one hand resting near his belt, his expression already carrying an accusation that his words had not yet spoken. "Where are you headed?" "Courtroom 4, Naomi answered. "That area is restricted." "I know." Something about her answer bothered him. Maybe it was how calmly she said it. Maybe it was the fact that she did not appear intimidated by the uniform standing in front of her. His eyes moved from her face to the leather case beneath her arm. "Do you work here?" Naomi studied him for a moment. Then her gaze dropped almost imperceptibly toward his badge. "Daniel Mercer, 4172. She recognized both immediately. The name had appeared repeatedly in the documents she had reviewed the night before. Complaints, disputed statements, missing footage, questions nobody had answered satisfactorily. Naomi looked back into his eyes. She had expected to read about Daniel Mercer that morning. She had never expected him to walk directly toward her. "I have authorization to be here," she said. Mercer stepped slightly into her path. "That was not my question." Naomi remained still. Around them, courthouse employees continued moving through the corridor, unaware that an investigation months in the making had just encountered its subject by accident. Mercer believed he was questioning a stranger. Naomi already knew exactly who he was. "That was not my question," Mercer repeated, letting the words hang between them as courthouse employees moved quietly through the corridor. Naomi Carter did not answer immediately. She had spent enough years inside courtrooms to understand the difference between a question seeking information and a question demanding submission. "Yes, I work within the federal court system," she finally said. Mercer narrowed his eyes. "Doing what?" Naomi studied him. "Is there a reason you need that information?" The question was calm, almost courteous, but Mercer heard resistance. "I decide what I need when someone enters a restricted area." Naomi glanced toward the security station nearly 60 feet behind them. "Then you can confirm that I was cleared downstairs. I am talking to you." Several people slowed as they passed. Naomi noticed them without turning her head. Mercer noticed them too, and the presence of witnesses seemed to make him more determined to control the exchange. "Identification," he said, holding out his hand. Naomi reached into her jacket and produced a federal credential wallet, but before opening it completely, she paused. "If your concern is whether I am authorized to be here, the security desk can verify that immediately." Mercer gave a thin smile. "Why make this difficult?" "I am not." "Then show me everything." Naomi's expression changed almost imperceptibly. She had seen this pattern in written complaints. A routine question became an unnecessary demand. A request for clarification became proof of defiance. Then the official report described the encounter as unavoidable. Mercer had no idea that the woman standing before him had spent part of the previous evening reading those exact allegations. Naomi returned the credential wallet to her pocket. "Call security." Mercer's jaw tightened. "Open the case." "No." The answer was immediate. "Those materials are confidential." "That is convenient." "It is also true." Mercer glanced at the leather case as though her refusal had confirmed something in his mind. People who belong back here usually do not have a problem proving it. Naomi held his gaze. There it was. Not a regulation. Not a policy. An assumption. "People who belong here?" she asked. Mercer shifted his weight. "You know what I mean. I would rather hear you explain what you mean." The hallway grew quieter. Near the elevators, Court Clerk Rebecca Hayes emerged carrying a stack of folders. She looked toward Naomi, then stopped so suddenly that the folders nearly slipped from her hands. Recognition flashed across her face. Naomi saw it. Mercer did not. Rebecca started forward. Naomi gave her a subtle look that stopped her. For months, allegations involving Mercer had arrived as paperwork, statements, dates, and missing pieces. Now Naomi was watching the pattern unfold without a report filtering it. Mercer stepped closer to the leather case. "Last chance. Open it." Naomi's voice became softer. "Officer Mercer, you have several lawful ways to verify who I am. You have chosen none of them." He glanced at her with growing irritation. "And you seem very interested in telling me how to do my job." Naomi looked once more at badge number 4172. No, she said. I am interested in seeing how you choose to do it when you think nobody important is watching. Nobody important? Mercer repeated, and for the first time his voice carried more than irritation. It carried insult. Naomi Carter recognized the shift immediately. She had heard it in courtrooms when confidence turned defensive, when a person stopped listening because listening might require admitting a mistake. Those are your words, Officer Mercer, she said. Not mine. He glanced toward the people watching from farther down the corridor. Rebecca Hayes remained near the elevators, frozen between stepping forward and respecting Naomi's silent instruction to stay back. Beside her stood an older black man in a brown overcoat, waiting outside courtroom 4 with a folder pressed against his chest. Naomi recognized him too. Samuel Brooks. His name appeared in one of the complaints inside her leather case. 6 months earlier, Brooks had reported an encounter with Mercer that ended with no disciplinary finding after courthouse video was listed as unavailable. Brooks stared at Mercer now, then at Naomi, and something changed in his expression. Recognition, not of her face, but of the situation. He had lived through a version of it before. Mercer pointed toward a bench along the wall. Put the case down. Naomi did not move. The case contains sealed federal material. You keep saying that. Because it remains true. Then prove it. Naomi glanced toward the security camera above them. A small green indicator glowed beside the lens. Recording. Her eyes shifted toward Mercer's body camera. Recording. Then toward Rebecca. Witness. Samuel. Witness. Each detail settled into place with the quiet precision of evidence entering a record. Mercer could have ended the encounter with one telephone call. Naomi knew it. Rebecca knew it. Even the deputy downstairs could have confirmed her authorization in seconds. But Mercer seemed increasingly committed to proving that his first assumption had been correct. Call the security desk, Naomi said. Ask whether Naomi Carter was cleared at 8:43 this morning. Mercer hesitated. Only for a second. I do not need instructions from you. Then call your supervisor. I do not need him either. Naomi's expression remained composed, but something colder entered her eyes. That sentence mattered. Mercer stepped toward the leather case and reached for it. Naomi turned slightly, keeping the confidential material against her side. His hand missed the case and caught the edge of her jacket instead. The fabric pulled sharply. A seam near Naomi's shoulder gave way with a clean tearing sound that seemed impossibly loud in the quiet corridor. Everything stopped. Rebecca covered her mouth. Samuel lowered his folder. A courthouse employee near the elevators froze with his telephone in his hand. Mercer looked at the torn fabric, then at Naomi, as if only now realizing how far the encounter had traveled from the simple question he could have asked downstairs. Naomi did not raise her voice. She did not step toward him. She looked at the damaged seam for one long second, then lifted her eyes toward the camera above them. Are the hallway cameras recording? Mercer followed her gaze. His confidence returned just enough for a dismissive shrug. Every second. Naomi nodded once. Good. Her telephone vibrated inside her pocket. She ignored it. Then she looked at his badge again. Daniel Mercer. Badge 4172. His face tightened. Why are you memorizing my number? Naomi adjusted the torn edge of her jacket and held the sealed case securely beneath her arm. I am not memorizing it, she said. I already knew it. For several seconds, Daniel Mercer said nothing. The certainty that had carried him through the encounter seemed to loosen, replaced by a question he could not quite bring himself to ask. Naomi Carter watched that uncertainty settle across his face, but she offered no explanation. Not yet. Behind them, the courthouse continued its morning rhythm, elevator doors opening, shoes crossing polished stone, distant voices calling case numbers, yet the small circle around Mercer and Naomi remained strangely still. Rebecca Hayes finally took one careful step forward. Mercer noticed her. Do you know this woman? He asked. Rebecca looked at Naomi before answering. Naomi gave another almost invisible shake of her head. She has authorization to be here, Rebecca said carefully. Mercer frowned. That is not what I asked. It is what you need to know. The response seemed to irritate him more than reassure him. Naomi noticed Samuel Brooks standing several yards away, watching in silence. His hands were wrapped tightly around his folder. When their eyes met, Samuel gave the faintest nod. Naomi understood immediately. He remembered. 6 months earlier, Samuel had filed a complaint describing an encounter that began with questions and ended with accusations he said were unsupported. The internal review had found insufficient evidence. The hallway footage from that day had been unavailable because of what the report called a technical failure. Another complaint had followed 3 months later. Then another. Different people. Similar language. Similar explanations. And one number appearing again and again. 4172. Naomi had spent hours studying those files the previous night, looking for connections that individual reports could not establish alone. Now the man behind. That number stood only a few feet away from her. Her telephone vibrated again. This time Naomi removed it from her pocket and glanced at the screen. United States Marshal Service. She declined the call and returned the telephone to her pocket. Mercer caught the movement. Who keeps calling you? Someone waiting for me. Name. Naomi looked at him. You are still asking the wrong questions. Mercer gave a short, uneasy laugh. You really think you are in control here? No, Naomi said. I think the facts are. His expression hardened again, but the confidence behind it was fading. Rebecca looked toward the camera above the corridor. Samuel did the same. Mercer followed their eyes, suddenly aware that the green recording light had been glowing throughout the entire exchange. Naomi adjusted the damaged seam of her jacket. You had several opportunities to verify my authorization, she said. You chose not to. You had witnesses available. You ignored them. You had a security desk 60 feet away. You never called it. Mercer stared at her. What exactly are you accusing me of? Naomi's face remained unreadable. I have not accused you of anything. That answer frightened him more than an accusation might have. Then an elevator bell sounded behind them. The doors opened. A tall man in a dark suit stepped into the hallway, scanned the corridor, and immediately focused on Naomi. Mercer straightened when he recognized the insignia clipped beside the man's credentials. United States Marshal Service. The deputy marshal began walking toward them. Naomi remained perfectly still. For the first time that morning, Daniel Mercer looked at the woman in front of him and wondered whether the question was no longer why she was inside the courthouse. The question was why someone from the United States Marshal Service was looking for her. Deputy United States Marshal Ethan Cole crossed the hallway without hesitation, but Naomi Carter gave him a subtle look before he could speak. Ethan understood. He slowed, stopping several feet away as though he had simply arrived at an inconvenient moment. Daniel Mercer noticed the exchange, and the uncertainty in his face deepened. Is there a problem here? Ethan asked. Mercer answered quickly. I am handling it. Naomi said nothing. Ethan looked at her torn jacket, then at the leather case beneath her arm, then toward the camera above the corridor. His expression remained professional. Understood, he said. I will wait. That response confused Mercer. He had expected questions, perhaps support, perhaps an explanation. Instead, the deputy marshal stepped aside and waited for Naomi. The silence gave her mind room to return to the documents she had reviewed less than 12 hours earlier. The first complaint involving Mercer had seemed ordinary on its own. Samuel Brooks claimed he had been treated as suspicious despite having valid courthouse business. Mercer reported that Brooks had been evasive. No reliable video existed. The matter closed. Then came another complaint. A black attorney named Denise Walker said Mercer repeatedly questioned her credentials outside a restricted conference room even after courthouse staff confirmed her identity. Mercer described the encounter differently. Again, no disciplinary finding. Then a third file reached the review board. Different date. Different person. Same officer. Same pattern. Naomi had learned long ago that injustice rarely announced itself with a confession. Sometimes it appeared as repetition. A phrase used too often. A procedure followed for one person and ignored for another. A camera that failed at exactly the wrong moment. A report whose language sounded strangely familiar. One inconsistency could be coincidence. 5 demanded attention. That was why Naomi had come early. Before the public hearing scheduled later that morning, she was supposed to meet privately with federal officials and review whether the complaints justified a broader inquiry. She had expected paper. She had expected testimony. She had not expected Mercer himself to provide a live demonstration in a hallway filled with witnesses and working cameras. What is in that case? Mercer asked again. Naomi looked at him. Documents you are not authorized to inspect. About what? That is confidential. Ethan remained silent, but Rebecca Hayes lowered her eyes as if she already understood where this was going. Samuel Brooks stood farther down the corridor, still clutching his folder. Mercer looked from one face to another. Something was changing around him. Not loudly. That was what made it worse. Nobody was arguing anymore. Nobody needed to. "Why did you know my badge number?" he asked. Naomi let the question sit between them. Then she opened the leather case only far enough to remove a single sealed folder. She kept its contents turned toward herself. Mercer could see nothing except a federal seal and a date. "Last night," Naomi said, "I reviewed several records connected to this courthouse." Mercer swallowed. "What records?" Naomi closed the case. "That is a better question." Footsteps approached from the direction of courtroom 4. A second federal employee appeared at the doorway and looked directly toward Naomi. "They are ready," he called. Ethan Cole finally stepped forward. Mercer turned toward him, waiting for an explanation. Ethan looked past him and addressed Naomi with the two words that changed the temperature of the entire hallway. "Your Honor. Your Honor." The two words landed softly, yet Daniel Mercer reacted as if every sound in the courthouse had suddenly disappeared. His eyes moved from Deputy United States Marshal Ethan Cole to Naomi Carter, searching for some explanation that would make what he had just heard mean something else. None came. Rebecca Hayes lowered the folders in her hands. Samuel Brooks remained perfectly still. Naomi simply looked at Mercer with the same calm expression she had worn from the beginning. "Your Honor," Mercer repeated. Ethan stepped beside her. "Judge Carter, courtroom 4 is ready for you." The color drained from Mercer's face. Naomi reached into her jacket and removed the credential wallet she had offered him an opportunity to verify minutes earlier. This time she opened it fully. Daniel Mercer stared at the identification, then at her name. Naomi Carter, United States District Judge. His mouth opened, but no words came. Suddenly, every moment of the encounter returned with a different meaning. Her confidence, her access to the restricted corridor, Rebecca's recognition, Ethan's arrival, the sealed case, the call from the United States Marshal Service. Mercer had interpreted every clue as resistance because he had already decided what kind of person stood before him. "Judge Carter, I did not realize that you were." He stopped. Naomi's eyes remained fixed on him. "That I was what, Officer Mercer?" He looked toward the witnesses. "There has been a misunderstanding. There were several opportunities to prevent one. I was following procedure." Naomi glanced toward the security desk in the distance. "Which procedure prevented you from verifying my clearance?" Mercer said nothing. "Which procedure required you to ignore a court clerk who told you I was authorized to be here?" Silence. Naomi did not raise her voice. She did not need to. "And which procedure," she continued, "changed because you discovered my title?" Mercer swallowed. "Your Honor, if I had known who you were, I would have handled this differently." Naomi's expression shifted, not toward anger, but disappointment. "That is precisely the problem." Samuel Brooks slowly lowered his eyes. The sentence seemed to reach him differently than everyone else. Naomi noticed. Mercer did too. "I can explain," Mercer said. "You will have that opportunity." For a fraction of a second, relief crossed his face. Then Naomi placed the sealed folder on top of her leather case. "But there is something else you need to understand." She turned the folder just enough for him to see a typed reference number and the name printed beneath it. Daniel Mercer. His expression collapsed. "What is that?" Naomi waited. She wanted him to understand before she answered. "I came here this morning for a confidential federal review involving a series of complaints connected to this courthouse," she said. "Your name appears repeatedly in those records." Mercer stared at the folder. "You were investigating me?" "I was reviewing allegations concerning your conduct." The distinction was deliberate. Naomi would not pronounce guilt in a hallway. Facts still mattered, even now. "And what happened here?" Mercer asked quietly. Naomi looked toward the glowing green light above the corridor, then toward Rebecca, Samuel, and Ethan. "What happened here will be preserved exactly as it occurred." Mercer looked at his own body camera as though noticing it for the first time. Naomi closed the leather case. "You thought this morning began when you stopped me," she said. "For you, Officer Mercer, it began months ago." Mercer stood beneath the courthouse lights with his eyes fixed on the sealed folder, but Naomi Carter gave him no more information. The hallway was no place to decide guilt, and she would not turn authority into spectacle simply because authority had been misused against her. "Deputy Cole," she said, "please make sure every available recording from this corridor is preserved, including the security system and Officer Mercer's body camera." Ethan nodded. Yes, Your Honor. Mercer looked up quickly. Judge Carter, I can explain what happened, and your explanation should be documented through the proper process. Her voice remained measured. Not given to me privately. That distinction mattered. Naomi was now a direct witness to conduct connected with a matter she had been reviewing. She knew exactly what responsibility required. I will also remove myself from any decision that could reasonably involve what happened to me personally this morning, she said. The review will be transferred through the appropriate independent process. Mercer seemed surprised. Perhaps he had expected retaliation. Perhaps he had expected her title to become a weapon. Instead, Naomi was doing the one thing he had failed to do from the beginning. She was following procedure. Footsteps sounded from the far end of the corridor. Captain Thomas Reed approached with another courthouse official beside him. His expression changed the moment he saw Naomi's torn jacket, Ethan Cole, and Mercer standing beneath the recording camera. What happened? Reed asked. Mercer began to speak, but Naomi raised one hand. Captain, before anyone discusses the incident, preserve the evidence and separate the witnesses so their statements remain independent. Reed nodded immediately. Understood. He turned toward Mercer. Officer Mercer, remain available. Do not access, alter, or request any recording connected to this hallway. Mercer looked stunned. Captain, I was doing my job. Reed's face remained neutral. Then the record will show that. For simple words. No accusation. No rescue. Just evidence. Samuel Brooks watched from several yards away, his folders still pressed against his chest. Naomi turned toward him. Mr. Brooks. His eyes widened when she said his name. You know me? I know your complaint. For a moment, Samuel could not answer. Then he looked at Mercer and back at Naomi. I thought nobody believed me. Naomi's expression softened. Being reviewed is not the same as being forgotten. Rebecca Hayes stepped closer. Your Honor, I witnessed the entire exchange. Thank you. Please give your statement separately. Mercer looked around as one person after another became part of a record he could no longer control. The badge remained pinned to his uniform, but the balance in the hallway had changed. Not because Naomi had demanded obedience. Not because anyone had humiliated him in return. The balance changed because the facts were finally being protected before they could disappear. Ethan gestured toward courtroom 4. Your Honor, they can delay the hearing if you need time. Naomi looked at the torn seam of her jacket, then toward the waiting courtroom doors. No, she said. We proceed on schedule. Mercer stared at her. After all this, you were just going in there? Naomi met his eyes. Justice does not become more just because it is angry. Then she turned toward the courtroom, leaving Mercer beneath the same camera he had been so certain would prove he was in control. 3 months later, the jacket still hung inside Naomi Carter's office. She could have replaced it the same afternoon. Instead, she kept it exactly as it was. The torn seam visible whenever she opened the narrow closet beside her desk. It was not a trophy. Naomi wanted no trophy from humiliation. It was a reminder of how quickly assumptions could become actions when authority stopped questioning itself. The review that followed that morning had moved beyond Naomi almost immediately. Because she had become a witness, she removed herself from decisions involving Daniel Mercer and transferred the matter through an independent federal process. Investigators preserved the hallway recordings, Mercer's body camera footage, security records, written reports, and witness statements. They also reopened several earlier complaints, including the one filed by Samuel Brooks. This time, the complaints were not isolated pieces of paper sitting in separate folders. They were examined together. Patterns emerged. Questions that had once been dismissed as coincidence became harder to ignore. Rebecca Hayes gave her statement. Samuel gave his. Other people came forward after learning that previous complaints were being reviewed again. Mercer was given the opportunity to respond through the same formal process Naomi had insisted upon from the beginning. There was no dramatic courtroom humiliation waiting for him. No public revenge. No moment where Naomi used her position to return the disrespect she had received. There was something far more lasting. Accountability. After the independent review concluded, Mercer was removed from courthouse duty while administrative proceedings continued. Several procedures governing complaints and preservation of security footage were also changed. Supervisors could no longer treat repeated allegations as unrelated simply because each incident had occurred on a different day. Months later, Samuel visited the courthouse again. This time he came without the brown folder he had once carried everywhere. Naomi encountered him near the elevators. "Judge Carter," he said, "I wanted to thank you." Naomi shook her head gently. "You told the truth before you ever met me." Samuel looked toward the camera above the hallway. Nobody listened. Someone should have. He considered that, then smiled faintly. They did eventually. Naomi watched him leave before returning to her chambers. Late afternoon sunlight stretched across her desk, warming the stacks of legal briefs waiting for review. She opened the closet and saw the jacket. For a moment, she remembered Mercer's certainty when he first approached her. He had believed he understood who belonged in that hallway, who deserved explanation, and whose word carried weight. What changed? Everything was not discovering that Naomi possessed an important title. Her dignity had never depended on being a federal judge. She deserved respect before Mercer knew her name, before he saw her credentials, before anyone addressed her as Your Honor. That was the lesson Naomi refused to let disappear beneath the satisfaction of the reversal. She touched the torn seam once, then closed the closet. Outside her chambers, the courthouse continued its familiar rhythm, doors opening, voices echoing, ordinary people arriving in search of something the building promised but did not always deliver equally. Justice was never supposed to depend on whether the person being judged had hidden power. It was supposed to protect the person who had none. Mercer had looked at Naomi and believed her appearance told him everything he needed to know. In the end, the truth revealed something very different. He thought he was deciding whether she belonged there. He never realized the record had already begun deciding whether he did.